gosh, it's fantastic to see so many people with us today. I'm so grateful for everybody who's gotten up and moved their busy schedule to be part of this day. My name is Sandy Guitar. I'm Managing Director of HX Venture Fund. My partners, Guillermo Borda and Elise Hobson, and I are thrilled to welcome you to Venture Houston 2022. Together with my team of many collaborators and contributors to this event's success, we want you to know that we are delighted to have you here present today. Throughout the day, we will celebrate our generous sponsors, limited partners, and key innovation ecosystem partners. We simply could not be more grateful to all of them for making this event possible. The purpose of Venture Houston 2022 is to illuminate the power of venture capital here in Houston. True to our model at HX Venture Fund, and with this audience here at the ION, we are bringing together the largest and most significant audience related to venture capital that Houston's ever seen. With over 750 attendees throughout the day, we're welcoming a really broad community, and I want you to know who's in the room with us today. We've got several hundred entrepreneurs here, so get to know them. We have over 100 venture capitalists, both from Houston and from all over the coast, from New York, Boston, LA, San Francisco. We have got corporate innovation officers in all kinds of business industries, MBA students, wealth managers, and more. Today is about sharing best-in-class practices, and it's also about making innovation happen by connecting founders to venture capitalists, students to startups, venture capitalists to corporate innovation leaders, and more. Last year, several investments were made as a result of collisions made at Venture Houston 2021. And some of you asked me, what's my wish for today? My wish for today is that again, rinse and repeat. Let's get to know one another in the room, because subsequent to that, more deals will happen. So yes, it's about sharing best practices, but we're also looking for tangible outcomes today. So we hope, entrepreneurs, you find a source of capital today, and we hope that venture capitalists, you find a great entrepreneur, corporate innovation partners in the middle of all that as well. And now it's my honor and pleasure to introduce our keynote panel this morning. With us today are amazing women who have much wisdom to share about new markets truly relevant to the venture capital industry, as well as building successful companies in those markets. Their stories are inspirational for Houston, especially at this exciting inflection point in the development of our city's venture capital and innovation ecosystem. With us today, as they come to the stage, and not in this exact order, but Dana Settle, co-founder and managing director of Graycroft, a true best-in-class venture capital firm based in Los Angeles and New York City, with over $2 billion in assets under management, with notable exits that range from fintech plays like Acorns, enterprise software companies like Icertis, healthcare solutions like Closed Loop, and aerospace solutions like Archer Aviation, and of course, consumer-facing companies like Goop. Also with us, Gwyneth Paltrow, founder and CEO of Goop. In 2008, Gwyneth launched Goop from her kitchen as a weekly newsletter originally. I can't wait to hear more about your story, Gwyneth. We know you to be a company builder, an angel investor, someone who really, like every other entrepreneur in this room, has started from the ground up to build an incredible franchise. Thank you for being with us today. And last but not at all least, Melinda Spaulding. After a successful career in media, and most recently as KRIV TV's anchor at Houston's Channel 26, Melinda joined Texas Southern University as Vice President for Advancement and Communications, reporting to TSU's president. Thank you for being here. Without further ado, please help me welcome them.
Hey. Good morning. Should we do a mic check? Are you good, ladies?
Mic check.
Okay. Check. We are ready to go. Gwyneth is ready. We've been talking about this since last night, how excited we are to address you all this morning. Can you all see us and hear us on that side of the room? Great. Do you all have your iPads? Do you know what to do about your questions? If you have questions you'd like to ask, we are accepting your questions right about now. And I have a few that are uploaded and ready to go. Okay. So I know you all probably have a lot of curiosity about these two ladies, about Dana Settle, about Gwyneth Paltrow, but I want to start with a question for the two of you. I'm so curious about your relationship in the interplay, between the two of you as a CEO, a founder, VC. Tell me what your relationship is like and how it's evolved over your time together.
I'll let
Dana
Gwyneth start.
Okay. Dana and I probably met in 2016, 17, something like that. I don't know. I was doing a round of fundraising, and one of my other VCs who works closely with Dana set us up on a blind date, and it was really, I don't know, we just connected very easily and very quickly. Dana has had an amazing career. She's an incredible venture capitalist, has made some amazing investments, and we were both, moms in LA as well. And so I think we had a lot to connect over, and, very luckily for me, Graycroft, led by Dana, invested in Goop. And I think throughout the ensuing years, we've just had, I think she's a great sounding board for me. We kick around ideas. We talk about investments. We talk about consumer. She gives amazing advice. So I'm a very lucky founder in that the VCs around my table are amazing people and understand what I'm trying to build. And Dana is just a great supporter.
Well, thank you to my PR person, Gwyneth. No, but I mean, Gwyneth, as you can see, is just an incredible founder and communicator and business builder, and somebody who has kind of jumped into the fray as a business builder. And I think what did start in her kitchen became much bigger, and really you've learned to be a leader and an chief executive officer. As you've been building, and that is very difficult to do, as we all know. I mean, it's hard. You have a founding vision, and you sort of build on that, and you have to hire people, and then a pandemic hits, and then, and there've been so many things that I've watched Gwyneth go through, and just learn and build and sort of get better and better. And it's why I love what I do, is watching the founders that I work with really sort of do that. And you've just been so extraordinary. So it's just, I feel very grateful every day. But, I think as an investor, our role is to advise and is to sort of reflect things. It's hard being a CEO. It's funny, I feel like that in my role at Graycroft sometimes, it can be lonely. And so just having somebody that is that sounding board and different investors, I think, play different roles, but I've just been grateful for your friendship too, candidly.
Thank you. That kind of goes to what some of us were talking about, your path, maybe traditional in terms of business school, but definitely non-traditional in terms of your success. And then Gwyneth, you have like a crash course MBA. We talked about that. So what are some of the things that you've learned in your role with Goop that you've been able to witness, Dana, and how have you been able to help each other?
Well, I'll say, what I have seen, really is sort of going from, again, a vision and an idea to executing something at scale is just two totally different things. Right. And, and it's hard. And the hardest thing, and I think especially, and I think Gwyneth and I kind of share this, like we sort of do lead from the heart. And I think when you do that, it does make it hard to make hard decisions. But you have to. As a leader in a business, every day you have to make hard decisions. You have to make changes on your executive team. You have people that started with you that don't make it all the way. You have customers that are happy and not happy. There's just, and so what I've seen you do is actually make that transition and really make those hard decisions. Even, when your investors say, oh, you should definitely do this, and there's 3 different investors saying 3 different things, ultimately making the call.
Okay, and then will you stop talking about me? Because I'm like sweating. I think you make a really good point, which is that when you are a founder like me that's coming from a completely different world and doesn't have an MBA, you are bumping up against two things, right? All of the kind of empirical things that you haven't learned, and the fact that you didn't study accounting and you didn't study marketing, and so there's all this stuff that other people know that you don't know, that you have to learn. And it's a really steep learning curve, right? It's like you have to learn about inventory management, and you have to learn about performance marketing, and you have to learn, it's like all of these things that were completely not in my wheelhouse or world whatsoever. So there's the kind of like the hard education piece. And then there's the personal piece, what Dana alluded to. You bump up against your personal weaknesses, right? Like for me, it is hard for me to say no. It is hard for me to disappoint people. So at the same time, you're forced to work on those hardest aspects of yourself, because you can't really be a good leader unless you know how to draw a really strong boundary and you know how to communicate in a way that, and there are ways to figure those things out. But so for me, it's been this incredible learning curve, both from an educational standpoint and from a personal development standpoint.
I'm really curious about your personal development, because there are some people out there, I'm sure, who can relate to you. And how did you maintain your confidence in the room with people who maybe had a different area of expertise than you did?
I think very quickly, you have to identify and love your strengths. And, like I hate Excel. I hate it. It makes me dizzy. It makes me puke. It makes me feel like a moron. Like, I hate it. So, no offense to Microsoft or whatever. But, so, there was a lot of time that I was spending trying to work in Excel, for example. And it's like, it's just, I got to a place where I can do it, I can read it, but it's not the best use of my time. And so it's okay for me to say, hey, like, I need you to do this, and I need to focus on the things that are my superpowers. And as long as I'm comfortable with the fact that, like, I know enough, because the buck stops with me, right? So I need to understand my P&L enough so that I can be accountable and take responsibility, but I don't need to get into, like, moving basis points around in Excel. And I can also... but that does mean I have to be confident about where my strengths lie and be able to index into those and know that I'm the expert in my domain. And then that group dynamic and everybody bringing their expertise to the table is really what makes it work. I think we also have this thing as women, we think we have to, do everything. It has to be perfect. We have to, and it's impossible, and it's not true. So I think, know your strengths, lean into them. Don't be afraid to articulate what your strengths are not, and then ask the questions that you need to ask.
You had a good amen corner right here in Dana with that. Did you want to add anything to that, Dana?
Well, I was just going to say, I think the best CEOs that I work with, period, are the ones that are asking the right questions. And that's what I've seen you really develop, is like the right questions to ask. And then, again, sort of letting people run with the rest. And that is the hardest thing. Truly. It's like, what is the question that you have to ask? What do you need to know in this minute when there's so many different things going on? And that, again, is just sort of developed over time, and also listening to yourself, because you know your business better than anyone. And so as much as there's, your board members and investors that sort of fly in for a quarterly meeting and say, you should do this, this, and this, you can say, like, okay, that's interesting. That's not, we should really focus on this.
Thank you. So this kind of leads us to our first audience question, and it's from Sarah Heald. Sarah, are you close by? I just wanted to wave to you, Sarah. Hi, Sarah. We're about to ask your question. So this is for Gwyneth. I guess we can talk about leaning into your superpowers and your strengths right now. How hard was it for you to find the right venture capital partner for Goop, and what differentiated Graycroft?
It was tough. Like my very first round, which was just like a seed kind of friends and family, was easy because people were like, oh, okay, we'll give you a little money, take little checks. And But when I went to raise my Series A, it was tough. I think Dana and I were talking about this at dinner last night. I think that there's a lot of, data right now around this. Like if you look at Wall Street, like it's difficult for a lot of investors to understand women-led businesses that are creating businesses for women. I mean, if you look at the stock, if the market caps right now we were talking about this last night, Rent the Runway or Honest Company or The Real, these companies that are doing things for women, like investors are having a hard time understanding. And I think that's true through and through. And it was certainly true when I went to go raise money. I had a lot of everybody took the meetings, I think, to get a selfie for their wife. Oh, my wife loves what you're doing, and then I'd be like, no, thank you. And so it took a company that had actually had experience with Goop impacting one of their portfolio companies. NEA was one of my investors. They're a fantastic VC. They've been incredible. They had a company called Moda Operandi that I had talked about on Goop, and I had completely changed their customer metrics, and so they knew like the power of Goop firsthand. And so once NEA came on board, then we had a couple of other great people, and then the next round is when I met Dana, and I think if you're lucky enough to be able to choose your VCs, I mean, the first time I just got lucky because I think the ones that are dicks didn't want to invest in my company, so I didn't want them either. But by the time like the unit economics were good and we were growing, and I could choose more. Dana was just like, first of all, I wanted a woman around the cap table, and I think what you want when you're looking for a VC is somebody who isn't just excited about like your upward growth that quarter. Like you want someone who's excited about what you're putting into the world, and somebody that can understand the model truly. Because for us, for example, we have a complicated model. We're contextual commerce, we're a little bit media, we're a little bit direct to consumer, we're a little bit of a retailer, and it's like it makes it work, but it makes it complex. So you want somebody who can really understand the model and can withstand like growth in certain areas and not others, and somebody who's going to be your champion, and somebody who you can go to when times are tough and not be worried that like, oh, I can't have this conversation with Dana because she's going to know that I'm like below budget. It's like, no, you have to know that like Dana is, which I do, like Dana's in my corner. If I'm below budget, I can go to her and say, what do you think? What are you seeing in the market? Like, can you help me? And so you need to have that basis of friendship, really, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think trust is a huge part of it, and you build that over time and through hard times, and good times are good times. Like you don't really have to think as much, but when you go through harder things, that's when I think real trust is built. I'll never forget though when we came for our first sort of full meeting with your team at Goop. It's so funny because I think 4 or 5 members of my team came, and we were sitting in the room and going through the model or whatever, and there was like a little mistake in the model or something, and Gwyneth called it out, and it was so funny, and I think my whole team was like, and it's just those moments, because I think again it's seeing the big picture and really knowing the big picture, but then like having the attention to detail that you are going to notice when something's wrong ahead of time and be able to course correct. Because everything, I mean, there is no business ever in the history of any business that has gone perfectly up and to the right. They just don't. It's not the way that it works. And consumer is much more tricky than enterprise, because you're dealing with consumers, and consumers' preferences change, and platforms that you market to consumers change. And so there is just a level of being okay with things not going exactly as planned, and then figuring out like, okay, then now what sort of makes sense to do? And again, that's where I think just like building that trust and that understanding of how each other works. And Gwyneth has, I mean, great other investors, like she mentioned NEA and a guy out of London, Frederick Court from Felix. Like, it's a good collaboration of people.
I wanted to go back to what you mentioned briefly in the beginning, and it's that question that we were thinking, how are we going to address this, but it needs to be discussed, that a lot of companies that have gone public, run by women, for women, having a tough time lately. So what are your thoughts, Dana?
Yeah, I mean, we were literally talking about this yesterday, and it's, you know, I wish that I had an answer. It's disturbing, candidly, if you look at the companies. I mean, look, lots of companies that have gone public in the last 12 days, you can say lots of companies that have gone public in the last couple of years haven't, fared well. There have been a lot of challenges, huge pullbacks in the public markets. But specifically, what seems to happen over and over again is with companies that are founded and run by women do tend to get more focus. The founders, tend to get more criticism, more broadly, and given sort of less leeway. And I don't know why that is. I do think that there's an element which is just again, sort of a little bit of a lack of understanding. I think the majority of investors, public investors, are men. I mean, the majority of dollars are controlled by men. And I know there are lots of men in the room, and I don't want to say that you're not great, you're wonderful too, but I think that it's more, I understand Gwyneth's business deeply as an investor, as a consumer. Like, I understand the interplay of the different pieces and why they're important, because it's how I think and live, and same with The Real, same with Rent the Runway. Like, yes, are there marginal things that need to be improved in these businesses? Of course, like all businesses. But should they just be kind of thrown away and like, oh well, this is what happens when, women start business. I mean, it's just there's a narrative around that gets more coverage in media than it should, and it needs to change. I don't know what else to say. It needs to change because it's not right, and I hope that Gwyneth and I will be part of making that change. I think we can, but I think it's really incumbent upon everyone to think about, do they really understand deeply the business that they are looking at? As an investor, do you really deeply understand it? Do you understand what it should look like, not just that it should look like some other business?
Gwyneth, as a founder, when you see these stories, and I do want to talk, I think you kind of took us there to talk about and think about solutions, like what can be done. What are your thoughts when you're seeing these headlines?
I just think about, like, where's the disconnect between these businesses that are strong and really serving a great consumer? Like, what's happening between that and the demand? Like, why is there not more demand in the public markets for these stocks? So I don't know how you create demand like that more broadly. I think, internally you create more demand by continuing to fulfill your mission and make great product and connect with the consumer and grow. But I'm not sure why that disconnect is happening on Wall Street.
Yeah, I mean, it is, and again, I sort of hate to focus on it because I'm such an optimist. I'm a venture capitalist. I'm like, yeah, of course, it's going to be solved. It's fine. It's not an issue, But that sometimes you do have to really actually look at these things and take them apart and say, wait a second, is this happening disproportionately? And I think that, again, the light is shown on them disproportionately. And I think that's what creates the problem. I mean, I think telling the stories around it, and I think this is what we need to, to talk about.
Thank you. I think this is a perfect time for a break for a question from Anonymous. So thank you, Anonymous, for your question right now. And this is for both of you, but we'll start with Gwyneth. As we transition into the new frontier of Web3 and user experiences, how do you see Goop evolving to meet the innovation changes?
So I probably would have had a little bit of a different answer before this crypto winter set in. I've been exploring Web3, and I think for my consumer it was very early anyway. I wasn't about to, integrate like Bitcoin payment or anything. I think my consumer is not quite there yet. And there's been a lot of talk about Web3 and is it over and what was it? I mean, I do think that the train has left the station in terms of the technology. Like that kind of transparent worldwide database exists and it will be useful. And I do think that, everything from like the deed of a house will be done through an NFT. And I think that, all the way down to loyalty and membership will probably be done through NFTs. And I do think that, the technology that it's all built on is here. But I think there's definitely been a huge correction. And I think it's also been very hard for people to adopt that thinking. And, I have these conversations with people around Web3 and they're just like, I don't get it, but more importantly, they kind of don't want to get it right now. At least like, the cohorts that I talk to. So I do think it's happening, it's here, it will be integrated, but I think it's just probably will be like a slower adoption curve than we thought a year ago.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think there is certainly an over-exuberance, I think, but that always happens with big, sort of technical shifts in innovation. I lived through Web 1.0, so, and it is funny, just, you hear the sort of same things being said. And it was, at that time, I remember, people were like, why would I ever want to shop online? Like, I can just go to the store. Like, who can, and so it is really funny to think about that now. I mean, when we started Greycroft in 2006, the iPhone didn't exist. So when you sometimes step back and think about how far we've come, and then, I think where we are in Web3 and blockchain and, sort of the infrastructure, I think we're like back at like early Cisco routers, it was sort of building the foundational pieces. And what started is a lot of excitement around NFTs, and people were like, okay, what is that? That will come. It's just, I think the applications will come in time when it makes more sense as to what the enabling technology really does.
So Dana, you've been on the ground level, just your background. If people don't know your background, I'd like to talk to you, or you talk to the group about your background at key moments of disruption. Can you talk about your path to get to Greycroft and how it's evolved over time?
Yeah, I was talking this morning with a smaller group about, this is, God, it's sort of embarrassing, but my first job out of college, I did an internship for a wireless company, cellular company. So the first independent cellular company in Seattle, it was called Macaw Cellular Communications. And I was part of a team that was looking at international opportunities. And this is when, like, it didn't exist, right? There weren't mobile phones. There was like the big brick. And so my first job out of college, I went and helped project manage a bidding process for spectrum in India. And that was in 1995. And at the time, there was only limited landline in India. And so it was just such a huge sea change when I think about it. And now think about the fact that India is basically, is further along in terms of their infrastructure than the United States. And I think that's something that's really interesting I think about a lot. I mentioned the Web 1.0 and sort of seeing that in Silicon Valley firsthand and investing in a lot of the infrastructure companies that built that. But I think that's where we always have to be. That's why I think fintech and crypto has been adopted largely outside the US before the US, because their existing systems aren't as robust and available as in the United States. And I think that that's where we have to be looking to those other markets to see what's really going to happen.
Thank you. And a lot of people are wondering about your path, Gwyneth, for Goop. in particular, and they want to know, have you always been entrepreneurial?
You know, I was always very interested in business, and I grew up in New York City, you know, very much steeped in that culture. When I was really little, I was in Los Angeles, which at the time was like mostly entertainment, and then when I was 11, we moved to New York City, and so I was very taken with, you know, all the dads were, you know, in LA, all the dads were writers for TV or whatever, and in New York, all the dads were in finance. And so I went to school with, you know, Henry Kravis's son, and very close friend of mine, and Jimmy Kane's son from Bear Stearns, daughter. So I grew up like very much, and I was really taken with it and fascinated by it. And I always remember like on movie sets reading the Wall Street Journal and the business section of the New York Times. And I remember Michael Douglas making fun of me for reading the business section when we were doing Perfect Murder. But I was always captivated by it and how it seemed like just this big, fascinating chess game to me, but it was this completely other world. And then I became an artist, and I was actually saying this last night, you know, it struck me recently that the soul of an artist and the soul of an entrepreneur are actually very, very similar. Mm-hmm. When you're an artist, you know, you have this idea that you want to put out into the world, and you think you're the only one that can do it, and you have something specific and unique to add, and you know, you're going to do everything you can to put it into the world and to have success. And so you have to have this like abject, ridiculous self-belief, and you have to, you know, persevere through everything. And all of those qualities are exactly what you need to have as an entrepreneur. And the difference between being an artist or an actor specifically and an entrepreneur is that when you're an actor, you're really waiting for someone to give you a job. Like, you can't execute unless you get the part. And so I loved kind of migrating over to being an entrepreneur, where I had, you know, very strong feelings and instincts and a passion to connect people to great stuff and information, and I could do it on my own terms. I could do it on my own timeline, and nobody was barring or impeding the execution of those things. So I know at the time it looked really weird, like, why is Gwyneth Paltrow, you know, leaving being a movie star to be like a startup founder? And I still ask myself that question sometimes. But I did have this, you know, unique opportunity to really execute on an idea. And so it started very small, you know. I was just writing a newsletter, and then I also had a lot of self-consciousness and trepidation about trying to monetize and all of that. So it was a very slow, iterative process to actually becoming a business, a very unique journey.
Do you think that's an extension of you just being a connector naturally and sharing information? Look, you shared some great information with me backstage, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try that next week. We won't say the product, but do you think that's just how your personality...
It's not to do with sex, guys.
No, not at all.
Get your minds out of the gutter.
Well, I'll try it.
Yes, I think I derive tremendous joy around connecting people to something that I think might help them, whether that's one friend to another friend, or a travel recommendation, or a wellness recommendation. That's really what drives me.
Thank you.
I think Gwyneth is a venture capitalist.
So this next question comes from our audience, and it comes from Hannah Lay. Hannah? Hi, Hannah. I know you're in here, Hannah. Thank you for your question. Oh, hi, Hannah. Here's your question. Okay, and your question just disappeared, but it was about teamwork and your working relationship between the two of you and your two companies, and how has that worked for your journey, your teamwork?
So, I mean, as far as sort of teamwork, I mean, we at Greycroft, we have a whole team. I mean, I'm co-manage the firm, but I'm also on the investment team and many other teams. But we have a platform team that collaborates with our portfolio companies on kind of different business development activities. We have an events team that throws a number of events every year, ranging from our CEO Summit, that's kind of our big event, to regular roundtables where we'll invite different executives from our portfolio companies. So team members of Gwyneth, you might not even know, have like been to many of our roundtables. I'm sure you do, and where we just look for opportunities to kind of help support the businesses in ways beyond the kind of founder CEO board relationship, because that's a part of it and a big part and an important part. But we really see sort of how else can we be a support team? Do you need help hiring? Do you need help thinking about sort of new tech platforms and being able to sort of connect those dots?
The teamwork working for you?
Yeah, I mean, I
feedback.
I just think that what's key to teamwork is just real transparency and safety, assuming positive intent, and like we sort of have this analogy at Goop, like that there are three kinds of knots. There's a square knot where the more tension it has, like the stronger the knot gets. A slip knot, which could stay or go, you never know, or a noose. And you want to work with people who are square knots. You want to be able to know that people have your back and you can trust them, and even if you're having a really difficult conversation, that there's trust there.
Thank you. So Dana, go ahead.
It's so funny. I mean, I feel like there's so many things that I've learned from Gwyneth, actually, including the Goopcation that we've implemented. But it is interesting. I think communication and ability to articulate something and storytell so that it's a visual in your head and it really sticks. I mean, that's just such a great example. And I think one of the things, we've talked about Venture Houston is sort of, how do you tell the story about what's happening here in Houston? I think in LA, we've done it pretty well because we have a lot of storytellers. But I think it's so important because honestly, I'm so blown away by what I'm seeing here. And it's so cool. And it's like, what's that story? What's that visual? What's the thing that's, that will stick in people's minds and make them think of Houston when they think of entrepreneurship? So anyway, it just popped into my head.
Gwyneth, I want to follow up with you on that because we discussed that. When you think, you think LA, you have certain thoughts, New York, Houston. What are your recommendations?
Like where to eat?
Yeah.
What art to go see?
It's challenging, but there's so much opportunity. So what are your thoughts when you see, just objectively from the outside?
Yeah, I mean, it's been amazing to just be here for the last not even 24 hours and start to get a sense of the community here, the investing community, and the entrepreneur community. And I think, Houston really has an opportunity to define kind of who you all want to be as an investing and investment community. And I think it's really exciting. You have such a massive influx of people coming here. I think, you're set up to support business in a way that, unfortunately we don't do in California, or we make it a little tough. And so I think it really becomes about articulating what the community, what do you want it to be? Who do you want to attract? It doesn't happen out of thin air. There has to be intention around how you articulate what the mission is in Houston for this community, and start to talk about it, and welcome those kinds of entrepreneurs and define what you want it to be.
Yeah, it's interesting. In LA, I mean, I feel like LA has sort of had fits and starts. And when I arrived sometimes I get the decades wrong, so it's embarrassing, but when I arrived in 2005 to LA, I moved from Silicon Valley and people thought I was crazy. I mean, they were just like, what are you doing? There's no entrepreneurship in LA. It can't happen. It's only happening in Silicon Valley. And I was like, well, that doesn't really make sense. Why is there, open source software and cloud computing if it's only going to happen in Silicon Valley? And And, and so slowly and surely, it's really built into now a very vibrant entrepreneurial community and hub. But I have to say, about maybe 4 years ago, or I can't, there was a media publication called .la that was started by a group of founders, including a guy, Spencer Raskoff, who was the founder, CEO of Zillow, and a number of others. And all of the venture community sort of supported it in small ways to invest, and a lot of angel investors did as well. And all that does is shine a spotlight on LA-based companies. And that's it. That's all it does. I mean, you can go on it and you read it and you're like, but it's funny how sometimes the simplest things actually make a huge difference. And now when people want to see what's going on in LA, they look at .la. It's not that complicated, actually. But I think it is really important to do. I will say, though, it's so funny because Gwyneth, being the natural connector and, curious and discoverer of all things great, comes to Houston. She's like, oh, well, we have to go here and we have to do this. I was like, of course you know.
Plugged in and ready to go. So our next question, and I know you're asked this often, but I think this group is in particular really interested. How do you get introduced to startups? And how do you know which ones will work and make that decision to invest?
Because we both invest. So we are introduced to startups, many, every day. And our best sources, honestly, are other founders and other investors. So really, I think because they have the best sense of the kinds of things that we'd be interested in, separate from what's on the website or what, you can sort of read, because we're having those conversations in real time. And they also, and this is sort of the soft side of it, if you asked, Gwyneth what I might be interested in, she's and you know her, she's gonna have a better sense for whether you're right for me. Not everybody's for everybody, and finding the right investor for your company is so important. So, I think getting those really trusted signals from other founders and other funders is the best way.
I think this flows really well. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, as an investor personally, I kind of I tend to gravitate towards like the, housewife strategy of like, if I use it and I love it, then I want to invest in it. And I think I see a really interesting deal flow because I also have a platform and I can really help amplify other businesses, which is a passion of mine to do, and I love to do that. So, but I do tend to stick to things that I really use or love or believe in, because I believe that's how I can have the most positive impact on the business.
You are a prolific angel investor, though. I feel like that is something that is never talked about, but it's, how many investments do you have?
I don't know, maybe 30 or something over the years. Yeah.
On the side.
In the range?
So I've, invested, so it'll be anything from like Canva or Aura or Uber to really small nascent companies that I just invested in a wellness tea company called Equity that we're just starting to get distribution for now. It's an amazing founder, and it's using different teas to help with ADHD, concentration, stuff like that. So it can kind of run the gamut.
Excellent, thank you. So our next question is from Kimberly Nielsen. Hi, Kimberly. There she is. Hi, Kimberly. She wants to know, what recommendations do you have for accelerator programs to motivate VCs to attend final pitch events?
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. That's a really interesting question. I think targeting the right VCs for the accelerator program. Because again, it's just about efficiency, and are you connecting to the right people to the right programs? And I do think that's one of the great things about today investing. PitchBook, Crunchbase, like so much information, so much data that's out there that you can literally just scan and know, okay, these are the people that need to be attending our accelerator program. I think the half of it. And then the other thing is, don't just make it about partners. At firms. Associates analysts and principals. I mean, they're phenomenal. I mean, that's why we hire them, and they are the ones that honestly like are at the front end of trends and are out there, so much more. I think there's always a desire to have it be the partners, like that's important, but it's not. It's really not.
Did you want to add anything to that? Well, our next question, I think, is going to be for you as well, Dana, in the beginning. So 2%, this is from Anonymous, by the way. Thank you, Anonymous. 2% of VC capital went to women in 2021. What's for both of you? As a female founder and a venture capitalist, what do you think it will take to ensure women are getting the same access to capital to improve this statistic?
See, we've been shocked into silence. I don't know, now that's down from, 6%. It keeps going, it's trending downward. So again, I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I'm not sure why, considering that women, control the disposable income of a household and, decide where the dollars go, you would think that venture capital would want to back. I don't know. What you're the right? Like what you?
Yeah,
you tell us.
I mean, the pandemic I think was not great for women. Candidly, I think women disproportionately are the caretakers, whether it's for children or for their aging parents, and particular the founders that are kind of at that stage that they might have otherwise been founding a company, or an executive that might have been joining a startup, and so I think that it was not great. The other thing that I saw happen is a real reversion to existing in old networks, and I think that was a downfall of Zoom. I think one of the great things about coming and being in these rooms, you do meet new people. Zoom, it was more connecting to people you already knew. And as we all know, that's a big part of the problem, is if you're not, if you're sort of staying in your insular networks, you're not, you're sort of not building these relationships, you're not building the trust, you're not building the things that make it, easy to reach out and raise money.
Thank you for that.
So we just have to fix all that.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
Just address it all. I want to remind the audience that this is the time for your questions. So it's your final chance to get your questions in here. They're coming up on my iPad right now. So I have my final question before we get to all of the audience questions. And I'm so curious. It's Monday morning. And I want to know what your Mondays are like at Graycroft with your LA and New York offices. I want to know what your Mondays are like at Goop. Those Monday morning meetings.
Well, we are trying to figure out this hybrid remote situation. So currently we're still working from home on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I would love to transition to more days in the office. We'll see what kind of mutiny so Mondays are, generally Zoom meetings at home at the moment, and then our in-person meetings are in the office on Tuesday. So that's when we have our executive team meetings and lots of one-on-ones in person, which I much prefer.
Yeah, and our Monday meetings, I mean, it's like the venture capital Monday morning meeting.
Right.
We do, it's actually interesting. So we are kind of back, we're hybrid back, it's 2 to 3 days. Our LA office, we actually just built a new office, which was a little bit contrarian, and we're opening it in 2 weeks. So right now we're out of the office. But normally it will be, in LA, we're in the office on Mondays. In New York, they're not in the office on Mondays. It's very funny. And, it's sort of, that is the work habit. So that is what it is. And in New York, it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the office. And in New York, it's Mondays and probably Thursday, Friday. So anyway, we're kind of working through it all, candidly. And, I think just keeping a flexible perspective. But as far as what we actually do,
right.
We go through our first thing, and this is something that happened over the pandemic. We do an all-hands meeting from 8 to 8:30. And we talk with our entire team, the entire company, about everything going on in the different teams. So, Danielle's team in marketing will talk about what's happening from a marketing and IR perspective. Our platform team will talk about different things happening on the platform. Our events team will talk about the events from that week, so that our investment team talks about different things happening with portfolio companies so that the whole team feels really connected on, oh, that's interesting that, this company did this, whatever. So finish that, then we go into our investor team meeting when we go through our deal pipeline and then portfolio company pitches. And we have pitches on Mondays and Wednesdays because things do tend to happen relatively quickly. And then we do something which is a little bit unusual, but after a pitch, and this is something about kind of having inclusive voices, as soon as the pitch is done, nobody talks, and we all vote on an app. And you do, and immediately.
It's very Ray Dalio of you.
But the idea, right, is you don't want people to get biased by the loudest voices in the room. Right. And that always happens. And, so lots of things we've built. But so that happens, the vote comes out, and that's not like a hard vote. That's just getting content out there. And then we talk about it. So.
Thank you. So Gwyneth, this next question is for you. It's a two-parter. So who or what areas were your most important hires at Goop? And the second part is, what is Goop's exit strategy?
Wouldn't Dana love to know?
No, because I want you to just keep building this and be the most important female-founded, large public company that everybody can use as an example.
Oh, God. So for me, my most important, it would be hard for me to say. I guess like the most critical ones for me were in the areas that, like operations and finance. Like I have a great CFO who's pretty new, and he's kind of a game changer for the business just in terms of, because I'm so creative and he's so binary. And so it creates a very positive tension on, and he really has us driving towards the right things, like as we're entertaining other things. But every member of my executive team brings something, I think, critical. And, as I said before, it's like all of the sum of us we're more than the sum of the parts. What was the second question?
That whole exit strategy.
Oh, the exit strategy, yeah. Right. I have been put off by what I've seen in the public markets. And, I'm not sure if I haven't seen that there's support for female-led companies right now in the public markets, or even, like Stitch Fix now has a man running it, but still, it's sort of, again, we're back to that thing. So, I don't think I think eventually, of course, we would love to have an exit of some kind, and I can stay or not stay at the company. But right now I'm really still just focused on building. Like we have so much left to do. And so, I don't know. I really believe like when it's right, it will present itself, and then we'll go from there.
That's what you want to hear, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Dana, this is for you. What do you look for in consumer-focused companies today? And it seems like not just DTC revenue and large marketing dollars that's important. What are key areas to focus on for this group?
For me, consumer businesses, it is like founder market fit, and that is, it's so important. And is it authentic, and is it original? I talk to Gwyneth about this a lot, but it's like, the thing that the algorithm can't figure out is what Gwyneth is thinking next. Like it just, and where she's going to go. And that is, in consumer so important. And that's how you stay ahead. Because if you're a fast follower, in consumer, it is difficult to ultimately really build something that endures. Now, I recognize that Google was the fast follower, but they did innovate in a pretty significant way. And there are always those examples, but I think that is a really critical piece. The second piece is on marketing, and out of the gates, like having some sort of real differentiation as it relates to marketing, because you cannot just you can't as a startup compete your way on the platforms to market your products. It's a losing game. So you have to have some major differentiator, and whether that's an audience like Goop had, whether it's something that connects you and does something completely different that is enduring. Those are the biggest factors, and there's lots of other trends that we're watching.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think, we are seeing direct-to-consumer, that model's really struggling right now, and so I think the importance of omni-channel, showing up where the consumer is, we've recently have diversified into other channels, Amazon, Sephora, and then always thinking about what are the other ways to connect a consumer to the core business. We just started this really fantastic food delivery pilot in LA that has been going super well, and I think it's because it's delivering on the brand promise in a tangible way. So I just would encourage all the entrepreneurs and consumer to really think outside the box in terms of ways that you can get what you have to say and what you make in front of people.
Goop Kitchen is amazing. I hope you guys get it here.
We've got some good questions coming up about fundraising after this. But first, Dana, this question is for you. And we have a lot of votes for this question. A lot of people want to know. And we've heard a little bit about your path and your journey, about how you got into VC. And this person is asking, as a young woman, it isn't something I ever considered, but I'm inspired by both you and Gwyneth. What do you recommend women do to get started on the VC path? This is one of our most popular voted questions.
I mean, there's no perfect path to venture capital. I think there's an entrepreneurship path, right? I mean, like Gwyneth. I mean, I joke, but I mean, she invests a lot. I mean, and I think would be an amazing venture capitalist. And so I think that is one path for sure, and that's a path regardless of gender. Mm-hmm. I think also just getting experience. And so anytime, I mean, if you can get an internship, if you can, get a job at a venture fund, even early on in your career, I think it's great because you might not stay there forever then, but doing it for a year or two so you sort of get a sense of it and then, maybe go start a company and then come back. I mean, I think the more that you have experiences that sort of mirror the founders that you're backing so that you can be empathetic and you can really understand the journey, will help you succeed. But just take advantage of opportunity and go for it. Like, reach out to it. All Raise is an amazing organization that is established to bring more women into venture. There's an incredible mentorship program that's part of it. I mean, just reach out and grab it.
Thank you. So we have a lot of questions about fundraising, and I'm going to try to take all of these questions and make them into one big one, maybe a couple of parts to this question. So many people are asking is, how did you know it was the right time? And we can start with that, and then we can go into one which I think is great, which is fundraising is really hard. and what are some best tips and best practices moving forward? So let's talk about timing first.
Well, when you're going to run out of money, you need to fundraise. Right. But it is a good question too, because sometimes you don't need to raise money, right? And you are profitable, and so it becomes like you're weighing dilution versus speed of growth. And I think if you're doing well and you're on an upward trajectory and you feel like you can really continue to grow quickly, especially if you're trying to get out ahead of other people in the same space, I think it's a good time to raise money. It's always hard to raise money because, the process is difficult, and then you're giving up your business. You're giving up a chunk of what you're trying to build. But I always think about, right, you're trying to grow the overall size of the pie so much that, you can take the dilution and it's not going to be as painful. I don't know, as far as the process goes, I mean, you're probably a better person to ask at this point, just because I think it's changed a lot. Like, the last time I raised money, you could tell a growth story. There didn't even really have to be a path to profitability. It was like, oh, we love, you're up and to the right, and we love the idea. And now I think it's changed a lot in terms of like, when is this company going to be profitable? And so I think probably, you do have to tell an incredible story, and that comes from believing so much in what you're doing. But I think, I think the profitability really has to be in the sight lines, right? Is that what you look for?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the market has swung like dramatically from valuing growth to valuing profitability. And that does trickle down to venture and early stage companies. That said, what you need to be able to do is tell the story to it. Somebody actually asked me last night, it was very funny, said, if you're investing in companies that don't have cash flow, like how do you know they're going to be good businesses, And I was like, well, we invest in companies that have very established models, business models, right? It's not, but you have to be able to show that path and show that, the investment into the business and the growth is going to create value that outweighs the investment. I mean, it's sort of, and so I think at any point in time, you have to be thinking about that. Like, does further investment, will it actually result in greater value? And if the answer is no, then you might think it's time to think about an exit, right? I mean, so I think that's how you know, but to Gwyneth's point, it's definitely swung hard toward profitability and having a path to profitability and not just being able to tell a pure growth story, at least for most.
So we have a minute left, and I had two amazing questions from the audience that I don't think we'll be able to get to because I want to leave room for your final thoughts. As we're closing out, any advice for this group today? I will tell you what the two questions were about, and if you want to include that, a lot of people wanted to know about your give back strategies for your companies. And then there was a great question from Fernando Miguel about your creativity and its role in connection in regard to entrepreneurial endeavors. So if you want to include any of that in your final thoughts, so many great questions from the audience, and we thank you all. Gwyneth, would you like to go first? Any final thoughts for everyone?
I just, for the entrepreneurs in the room, I think, it is a difficult, even though there seems to be a ton of money in the market. I think, you see in the news, like investments are down. I think people are getting more conservative. And I just want to say, I relate to how difficult it is. It's so hard to build a business and to get people on your side. And I would just encourage you all, like if this is something that you have to do, just not to give up and not to let rejection or obstacles defer you, because it's such a beautiful thing to be able to create something and put it into the world, to help people's lives be better. And so just a word to you all that, I have a lot of respect and kinship with you, and not to give up, because this recession is real and it sucks.
I think she said it well.
All right,
that's all. I agree.
Dana Settle, Gwyneth Paltrow, thank you so much for joining us for our opening session. Thank you all.